The people who truly respect you never ask for these 7 things. There's a dangerous misunderstanding that quietly destroys the confidence of millions of men. They believe respect is something they must constantly earn. So they explain themselves. They prove themselves. They overextend themselves. They tolerate behavior they know is wrong. Not because they enjoy it, but because they fear losing someone's approval. The tragedy is this. The harder they chase respect, the further it moves away. Because genuine respect has never been built on desperation. It has always been built on standards. Think about the people you respect most. Perhaps a mentor, a father, a leader, a friend. Do they spend every day convincing you to admire them? Or did they quietly live by principles that made respect inevitable? Real respect rarely announces itself. It reveals itself through consistency. The silent strategist understands something that changes every relationship. Respect is not measured by what people say. It is measured by what they never ask you to sacrifice. Imagine an architect designing a magnificent bridge. Every beam is carefully measured. Every support has a purpose. Now imagine someone removing one support every few weeks. At first, the bridge still stands. Nothing seems different. Then another support disappears. And another. Months later, the structure collapses. People call it sudden. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual compromise. Relationships collapse the same way. Rarely because of one enormous betrayal. More often because of hundreds of tiny compromises made in the name of keeping the peace. The silent strategist notices the first missing beam. He does not wait for the bridge to fall. The world often tells men to be agreeable, to be understanding, to avoid conflict, to keep everyone happy. Those qualities have value, but only until they require abandoning yourself. Because the moment peace demands self-betrayal, it is no longer peace. It is surrender. And surrender has never created lasting respect. Years ago, I watched an elderly craftsman carving wood by hand. Every movement was patient, precise. Someone asked him why he rejected pieces of beautiful wood that appeared almost perfect. He smiled, because small cracks become broken furniture. Then he added something I have never forgotten. The strongest things fail from the smallest weaknesses left unattended. That lesson had nothing to do with wood. It had everything to do with people. Tiny compromises become habits. Habits become identity. Identity becomes destiny. There is one question I wish every young man asked himself much earlier in life. What does a person repeatedly expect me to give up in order to keep them comfortable? Because the answer reveals everything. Some people ask you to give up honesty. Others ask you to give up ambition. Others ask you to give up confidence. Others ask you to give up boundaries. None of these requests arrive wearing the face of manipulation. They arrive wearing the face of love. Friendship, family, loyalty, understanding. That is why they are so dangerous. Before we explore the first principle, take a moment to think about someone in your own life. Not someone obviously toxic, someone you genuinely care about. Now ask yourself, have I become more myself around this person, or less? That answer deserves your attention, because truly respectful relationships expand who you are. They never require you to become smaller. One of the first lessons inside the Dark Mind Protocol is learning to recognize this difference before years of your life disappear. Try to earn acceptance that should never have required self-sacrifice in the first place. Inside the program, I teach the psychological frameworks that help you build relationships rooted in respect instead of emotional dependency. If that is the kind of life you want to create, you'll find the complete system waiting for you in the first pinned comment. Today, we're going to uncover 7 things that people who genuinely respect you will never ask you to surrender. Not because perfect people exist, but because genuine respect has limits it refuses to cross. And once you recognize those limits, you'll never confuse control with love again. The first thing they never ask you to give up. Your principles. There is a sentence that sounds noble, but has quietly destroyed countless lives. If you really loved me, at first, it seems harmless, even romantic. But hidden inside those 5 words, there is often an invisible transaction: love in exchange for self-betrayal. The silent strategist recognizes the difference immediately. Love invites, manipulation bargains. Imagine an old compass carried by explorers centuries ago. Storms came, ships drifted, clouds covered the stars. Everything around them changed. The compass never did. Its purpose was not to follow the weather. Its purpose was to point north. Principles work exactly the same way. They're not designed to make life easier. They're designed to prevent you from getting lost. The tragedy is that many people throw away their compass simply because someone else dislikes the direction it points. One of the clearest signs that someone respects you is that they never ask you to violate your own conscience for their convenience. They may disagree with your decision. They may feel disappointed. They may even leave. But they never demand that you become someone else, just to make them comfortable. There is enormous wisdom hidden in that distinction, because disagreement is healthy. Self-betrayal never is. Years ago, a young apprentice worked beside an old blacksmith. One afternoon, a wealthy man entered the workshop. He offered an extraordinary amount of money, but only if the blacksmith would secretly use cheaper metal inside a beautiful sword. No one would ever notice. The apprentice whispered, "We could earn enough for years." The old blacksmith quietly shook his head. Then he placed the unfinished sword back into the fire. A dishonest sword cuts its owner first. The apprentice never forgot those words. Neither did I, because every compromise we make against our own values leaves an invisible crack inside us. The world may never see it, but we feel it every single day. The second thing they never ask you to give up: your boundaries. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They think boundaries exist to control other people. They don't. Boundaries exist to define where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. Imagine owning a beautiful home. You invite guests. You welcome them warmly. But would you remove the front door simply to prove that you're generous? Of course not. The door doesn't exist because you hate visitors. It exists because you value the home. Your mind deserves the same protection. So does your time. So does your peace. People who truly respect you may not always like your boundaries, but they will respect your right to have them. Manipulators react differently. The moment you establish a healthy limit, they often accuse you of changing, of becoming selfish, of becoming cold. Not because your boundary is unreasonable, because your boundary limits their access. The silent strategist understands this immediately. Every healthy boundary reveals unhealthy expectations. Years ago, I watched a gardener pruning one of the most beautiful trees I had ever seen. He removed branch after branch. At first, it looked destructive. I finally asked, "Why are you cutting away something so healthy?" He smiled, "Because growth without discipline eventually destroys itself." Months later, that tree was stronger than every other tree in the garden. The branches he removed allowed the rest to thrive. People work the same way. Every unnecessary obligation you remove creates space for something meaningful to grow. The third thing they never ask you to give up: your self-respect. There is one mistake almost everyone makes at least once: confusing love with tolerance. They tolerate disrespect, broken promises, repeated lies, humiliation disguised as jokes, emotional manipulation disguised as concern, all because they believe enduring pain proves commitment. It doesn't. It proves fear. Fear of losing someone, fear of starting over, fear of being alone. The silent strategist eventually realizes something life-changing. Self-respect is not what remains after a relationship succeeds. It is what determines whether the relationship deserves to continue at all. Imagine carrying a priceless diamond through a crowded marketplace. Would you casually hand it to every stranger who asked? Of course not. Then why do so many people hand out something even more valuable? Their dignity. Every time they tolerate treatment they know is wrong, they trade a small piece of that diamond. Eventually, very little remains. The tragedy is that this rarely happens overnight. It happens one compromise at a time. Before we continue, I want you to remember one conversation from your own life. One moment when your intuition quietly whispered, "This isn't right," but you ignored it. Not because you lacked intelligence, because you feared the consequences of listening. That single decision probably taught you more than any book ever could. Inside the Dark Mind Protocol, we spend considerable time learning to trust that quiet internal voice again. Not impulsively, not emotionally, but intelligently. Because the strongest boundaries are built long before anyone tries to cross them. If you want to develop that kind of psychological clarity, you'll find a complete framework waiting for you in the first pinned comment. We've explored the first 3 things that genuine respect never asks you to surrender. But the next 4 are even more subtle because they disguise themselves as normal relationship behavior. Most people never recognize them until years have already passed. One of the most painful discoveries a man can make is realizing that someone never truly wanted the best version of him. They wanted the most convenient version, the version that always said yes, the version that never questioned anything, the version that apologized first, the version that carried responsibilities that were never his. At first, this feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like sacrifice. But over time, something inside begins to disappear. Your confidence becomes hesitation. Your certainty becomes doubt. Your voice becomes quieter, not because you became weaker, because you slowly learned that being yourself created friction. So you adapted, little by little, until one day you could no longer recognize the man looking back at you. That is why genuine respect never asks you to become smaller. The people who truly value you may challenge your ideas. They may disagree with your decisions. They may even tell you uncomfortable truths, but they will never ask you to abandon your identity just to make the relationship easier. There's an old story about a sculptor who spent decades carving marble. A young student once asked him how he created such magnificent statues. The sculptor smiled and said, "I never create the masterpiece. I simply remove everything that does not belong." That answer stayed with me for years. Because becoming a stronger man works exactly the same way. Growth is rarely about adding something new. More often, it is about removing everything that never belonged in the first place. The fear of disappointing everyone. The need to explain every decision. The habit of apologizing for having standards. The belief that saying no makes you selfish. None of those things are part of your true character. They are layers, and every layer you remove reveals a stronger foundation underneath. The Silent Strategist understands that maturity is not measured by how many people approve of you. It is measured by how little you betray yourself in order to gain that approval. Think about the strongest men you have ever met. Not the loudest, not the richest, not the most famous. The ones whose presence immediately commanded respect. They all shared one quiet characteristic. They never looked like they were trying to convince anyone of their value. They simply lived it. There was no performance, no desperation, no constant search for validation. Their confidence came from alignment. Their actions matched their principles. And because of that, people trusted them. Not because they were perfect, because they were consistent. Consistency is one of the rarest forms of strength in the modern world. Most people change depending on who enters the room. Around one group, they become confident. Around another, they become insecure. Around another, they become agreeable. Around another, they become silent. Eventually, they stop knowing who they really are. The Silent Strategist refuses to live that way. His personality is not adjusted to fit every audience. His values are not negotiated for temporary acceptance. His character does not depend on applause. And that is precisely why genuine respect follows him. Not because he demands it, because authenticity naturally attracts trust. Now ask yourself something honestly. When people describe you, are they describing the real you, or the version you have learned to perform in order to avoid rejection? That question is uncomfortable, but uncomfortable questions often become turning points. One of the biggest transformations inside the Dark Mind Protocol happens when men stop asking, "How do I make people respect me?" and start asking, "How do I become someone I respect?" Everything changes after that. Because when self-respect becomes your foundation, external respect becomes a consequence, not an obsession. And once that shift happens, you stop chasing validation. You start building a life that naturally commands it. There's another thing that people who genuinely respect you will never ask from you. They will never ask you to constantly prove your worth. This may sound obvious, but if you pay close attention, you will realize how many relationships are built on invisible auditions. Some people never allow you to simply exist. You must constantly demonstrate your loyalty, your love, your commitment, your usefulness. It never ends. The moment you satisfy one expectation, another quietly appears. It is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour into it, it is never enough. The silent strategist recognizes this pattern early, because healthy relationships are built on trust, not endless testing. Imagine working for a king who demands proof of your loyalty every single morning. Every sunrise, you must convince him that you deserve to remain by his side. Would that be loyalty or fear? Real loyalty grows naturally. Fear requires constant evidence. Many people confuse these two. That confusion costs them years of emotional exhaustion. Years ago, I met an old military instructor who had spent decades training elite soldiers. Someone asked him what separated the strongest recruits from everyone else. His answer surprised me. He didn't mention strength. He didn't mention intelligence. He didn't mention discipline. He simply said, "The strongest men don't waste energy trying to convince others that they're strong. They spend that energy becoming stronger." That lesson applies to every area of life. A confident man doesn't spend every conversation proving his value. He invests that energy into developing it. Competence speaks more quietly than insecurity, but it speaks for much longer. This is why people who constantly seek validation often feel trapped. Validation creates temporary relief. Then the hunger returns. Another compliment, another achievement, another approval, another audience. The cycle never ends. The silent strategist breaks that cycle completely. He replaces external validation with internal standards. Every evening, he asks himself different questions. Did I act according to my values? Did I keep my word? Did I improve today? Did I remain disciplined when it mattered? Those answers become his source of confidence. Not applause, not likes, not compliments, not attention. This kind of confidence is incredibly difficult to manipulate because nobody else controls it. Now think about your own life. How much of your energy has been spent trying to convince people who had already decided not to appreciate you? How many hours? How many conversations? How many sleepless nights? Simply trying to earn recognition that should have been freely given in the first place? One realization changes everything. The right people don't require endless demonstrations of your worth. Your consistency becomes enough. Your honesty becomes enough. Your character becomes enough. That doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes. It means your mistakes won't erase your value. People who truly respect you separate your behavior from your identity. Manipulators do the opposite. One mistake becomes proof that you're inadequate. One disagreement becomes proof that you're selfish. One boundary becomes proof that you've changed. The silent strategist refuses to accept that equation because he understands that imperfection is part of being human. Loss of character is a choice. Those are not the same thing. There is another quiet sign that reveals genuine respect almost immediately. People who truly respect you never ask you to abandon your purpose. They don't become threatened when your life expands. They don't resent your discipline. They don't compete with your growth. Instead, they celebrate it. Imagine climbing a mountain with two different companions. The first becomes angry every time you move higher. He keeps asking you to slow down, to stop, to come back. Not because the climb is dangerous, because your progress reminds him that he stayed behind. The second companion climbs beside you. When you stumble, he reaches out his hand. When you succeed, he smiles with genuine pride. When you become stronger, he never feels smaller. That is the difference between competition and respect. One fears your growth, the other encourages it. The silent strategist learns to recognize this difference before investing years into the wrong relationships. Inside the dark mind protocol, One of the deepest mindset shifts is understanding that your purpose must always remain greater than your need to be accepted. The moment acceptance becomes your highest priority, your purpose quietly begins to disappear. But when purpose becomes your foundation, the opinions of others naturally lose much of their power. If that is the kind of inner strength you want to build, you'll find a complete system waiting for you in the first pinned comment. There is one request that often sounds harmless. Sometimes it is even disguised as love, sometimes as concern, sometimes as advice. But if you pay close attention, it always leads to the same destination. It asks you to become less than you are capable of becoming. People who genuinely respect you never ask you to shrink your potential. They never ask you to dim your ambition because it makes them uncomfortable. They never ask you to stop growing simply because your growth reminds them of their own excuses. Growth has a strange effect on relationships. It reveals who is inspired by your progress and who is threatened by it. The difference is impossible to hide forever. Imagine placing two candles in a dark room. When you light the first candle, does the second candle lose its flame? Of course not. One light never steals brightness from another. Yet many people live as though success works differently. They believe your confidence somehow diminishes theirs. Your discipline exposes their lack of it. Your ambition forces them to confront the dreams they abandoned years ago. Instead of growing alongside you, they begin pulling you backward, not because they hate you, but because remaining where they are feels safer than changing. The silent strategist understands this without becoming bitter. He doesn't judge people for being afraid, but he refuses to make fear his home. Years ago, I heard an old rowing coach tell his athletes something that stayed with me. He said, "A boat never notices calm water. It only discovers who is rowing when the current turns against it." Life works exactly the same way. Anyone can encourage you when success is easy. Anyone can applaud when the outcome is already guaranteed. But when your dreams demand sacrifice, when discipline becomes uncomfortable, when progress requires loneliness, that is when you discover who is actually rowing beside you. Respect reveals itself during difficult seasons, not comfortable ones. One of the greatest mistakes a man can make is believing that everyone deserves unlimited access to his future. Some people are meant to walk beside you. Others are only meant to teach you a lesson before leaving. The problem begins when you confuse those two groups. You keep inviting temporary people into permanent places, and eventually, your direction becomes blurred by voices that were never qualified to guide your life. The silent strategist becomes very selective about whose opinion receives emotional weight. Not because he believes he knows everything, but because he understands that advice is never separated from perspective. A person who surrendered their dreams will often recommend surrender. A person who fears risk will often recommend safety. A person who avoids responsibility will often encourage excuses. None of this happens maliciously. People usually offer advice that protects the life they have chosen. That is why wisdom requires discernment. Not every opinion deserves equal influence. Imagine boarding an airplane. Would you ask every passenger how to fly it? Of course not. Then why do so many people allow random opinions to determine the direction of their lives? Confidence begins growing the moment you stop asking everyone for permission. There's another thing people who genuinely respect you never demand. They never make you choose between your purpose and your peace. Healthy relationships protect both. Unhealthy relationships force you to sacrifice one for the other. If maintaining a relationship requires constant anxiety, constant overthinking, constant emotional exhaustion, you're not preserving peace. You're financing chaos, and chaos always charges interest. Little by little, your energy disappears. Your creativity fades. Your discipline weakens. Your identity becomes difficult to recognize. Then one morning, you wake up wondering where the confident version of yourself went. He didn't disappear overnight. He slowly traded pieces of himself for temporary harmony. That is one of the most expensive trades a man can ever make. The silent strategist chooses differently. He understands that peace is not something another person gives him. It is something he protects. Every decision either strengthens that protection or weakens it. That is why emotionally intelligent men become comfortable disappointing people. Not because they enjoy conflict, because they understand a painful truth. Try and make everyone happy eventually makes you lose yourself. And once you lose yourself, nothing you gain from others will ever feel enough. Inside the Dark Mind Protocol, this principle becomes one of the foundations of psychological freedom. You learn that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is responsible, because the man who cannot protect his own mind will never be able to lead his own life. If you are ready to build that level of emotional discipline and inner stability, the complete system is waiting for you in the first pinned comment. There's only one final truth left to understand, and it may be the most important lesson of this entire conversation, because it explains why some men command respect without asking for it, while others spend their entire lives chasing something that always seems just out of reach. There's one final thing that people who truly respect you will never ask you to surrender. They will never ask you to become someone you are not. That may sound simple, but it is one of the rarest gifts you will ever experience. Most relationships begin with authenticity. Then, slowly, small expectations begin to appear. Don't say that. Don't wear that. Don't spend time with those people. Don't chase that dream. Don't be so ambitious. Don't be so quiet. Don't be so confident. Individually, none of these requests seem dangerous. Together, they slowly rewrite your identity. The change is almost invisible. You don't wake up one morning feeling like a different man. It happens over months, sometimes years. You laugh a little less. You speak a little less honestly. You stop sharing your real opinions. You avoid difficult conversations. You hide parts of your personality just to keep everyone comfortable. And then something strange happens. The acceptance you worked so hard to earn no longer feels satisfying. Because deep down, you know those people are no longer accepting the real you. They're accepting the version you created to avoid rejection. That is one of the loneliest feelings a man can experience. Being surrounded by people, while feeling completely unseen. The silent strategist refuses to pay that price. He understands that authenticity filters people naturally. Some will leave. Some will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. But the ones who remain will respect the man you actually are, not the character you performed. Imagine an eagle flying above a mountain range. Does it change the way it flies because crows are making noise below? No. The eagle doesn't waste energy arguing with birds that were never flying to the same destination. It simply keeps climbing. There is profound wisdom in that image. Many men spend years trying to convince people who have already decided not to understand them. They explain. They defend themselves. They justify every decision. They replay conversations in their minds. They lose sleep over opinions that will never change. Meanwhile, life quietly moves forward. The silent strategist chooses a different path. He understands that clarity is more valuable than approval. Not everyone has to agree with your direction. They only need to respect your right to choose it. And if they cannot, distance often becomes the healthiest answer. Not revenge, not anger, distance. There's an old saying that I have found to be true over and over again. You discover the quality of a relationship the moment you stop overextending yourself. Think about that. Stop initiating every conversation. Stop solving every conflict. Stop apologizing for things that were never your responsibility. Stop carrying the emotional weight for two people. Then watch carefully. Some relationships become stronger. Others disappear. Neither outcome is a loss. One reveals mutual respect. The other reveals dependence. Truth is never your enemy. Only illusion fears being exposed. Throughout this entire conversation, we've explored 7 things that people who genuinely respect you never ask you to sacrifice. Your principles, your boundaries, your self-respect, your worth, your purpose, your peace, and finally, your identity. Notice the pattern. None of these things can be bought. None of them can be replaced. And once they are repeatedly compromised, a man slowly begins to disappear, even while everyone around him believes he is doing just fine. That is why protecting these 7 foundations is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-respect. And self-respect is the beginning of every meaningful relationship you will ever build. Before we finish, I want to leave you with one final thought. Imagine meeting yourself 10 years from now, the strongest version of you, the wisest version, the calmest version, the most disciplined version. Would that man tell you to keep sacrificing your values just to be accepted? Would he tell you to silence your dreams to make other people comfortable? Would he tell you to abandon your purpose because someone else doesn't understand it? Or would he quietly place a hand on your shoulder, look you in the eyes, and remind you that the life you want will always require the courage to disappoint the wrong people? I believe you already know the answer. That future version of yourself isn't waiting for permission. He's waiting for a decision. Inside the Dark Mind Protocol, everything is built around helping you make that decision with confidence. Not through manipulation, not through ego, but through emotional discipline, psychological clarity, and unwavering self-respect. If you're ready to stop chasing approval and start building a life that naturally commands respect, you'll find a complete framework in the first pinned comment. And remember this, the people who truly respect you will never ask you to become less than who you are. The right people won't fear your boundaries. They won't resent your growth. They won't demand constant proof of your worth. They won't ask you to betray your principles. Instead, they will make it easier for you to become even more of the man you're meant to be. Protect those people. Become one of those people. And never trade your identity for temporary acceptance. Because the moment you respect yourself completely, the opinions that once controlled your life begin to lose their power. That is the quiet strength of the silent strategist. And that is where real freedom begins.